very active personal diplomacy to try to solve problems, to try to unlock conflicts that have been frozen and try to make progress working with the president in places where American leadership is needed more than ever.
He's had some success and some luck. His often rambling speaking style and off-the-cuff remarks are frustrating for his aides, but they came in handy in September. President Obama was ready to strike Syria when Mr. Kerry was asked at a press conference if there was anything President Bashar al-Assad could do to avoid war.
He could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week. But he isn't about to do it, and it can't be done, obviously.
Russia seized on Mr. Kerry's inadvertent diplomatic solution and gave the White House a fortuitous way out of a war that the American president never wanted. And then, in November, a nuclear deal in Geneva with Iran. The foundations were laid during President Obama's first term, the talks carefully managed by the White House, but Mr. Kerry drove it to the finish line.
We've been friends for many years, but I'm very frustrated.
But back in the U.S. Congress, there's no gushing. Senator John McCain, a Republican and a Vietnam War veteran like Mr. Kerry, called his friend and former colleague a human wrecking ball, too eager to make deals.
Kim Khatas reporting there. The World Health Organization says we're facing what it calls a global tidal wave of cancer. It predicts there'll be 24 million new cancer cases each year by 2035, but that half could be prevented because they're caused by lifestyle. WHO scientists says that cancer prevention should focus on tackling smoking, obesity and alcohol consumption. But much of the rise is simply due to a rising and aging population. And the picture does vary from country to country. Uganda, for instance, has one of the highest cancer rates in the world. Dr. Jackson Oram is from the Uganda Cancer Institute in Kampala. He told me that lifestyle factors are the biggest problem there.
The type of cancers that we have in this part of the world, just like in any developing countries, are those related to infections. So a good proportion of the cancers that we are seeing is related to that. Of course, you do know that a good number of cancers in women are caused by HPV, that is human papillomavirus, one of the viruses that has been known to be causing cancer. Then secondly, also, there is the increase due to HIV. HIV itself and also the other factors that are related promotes cancers. And I think this is one of the reasons why we do have increase in cancer incidence in this part of the world. I should also mention, of course, the rising population in Uganda.
Right, so that's pushed up the numbers. I mean, and is it also the case that people in Uganda are coming for treatment much later than they perhaps would in other countries?
Absolutely. In fact, that is the situation in most of the developing countries in sub-Saharan Africa because of many factors, lack of awareness, and then also insufficient infrastructure or health system. You find that most people come when it is very late. Yeah.
Yes, and am I right in thinking that for a while you were the only cancer specialist in the country? Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the population of Uganda is about the same size as Canada's, I think.
Well, we are now 35 million. So, I mean, that is really a huge population for the size of the country that we have. And I think the increase has been very rapid in the last few years.
So how are you trying to change this? I mean, you can't single-handedly raise awareness, can you?
We have embarked on training. We have also embarked on making sure that, resources are allocated to cancer management. And our government has actually done that to a great extent. But of course, this is a situation that has been like that for a very long time. And you cannot just fix it within a very short time. But the most important thing is really a lesson also for other African countries that they should adhere to what WHO preaches. WHO says that every country should develop a framework called the National Cancer Control Program, within which it can holistically and in a way which can be systematic handle the problem of cancer.
But if the WHO is talking about, diet, smoking, exercise, so that's not really applicable to Uganda.
It would be really a priority for a small segment of our population because, as I told you, since most of the cancers are really related to infection, that means we need to tackle infectious-related cancers as number one.
That was the picture in Uganda. That was Dr. Jackson Oram of the Uganda Cancer Institute in Kampala. Just some news that's breaking, that's some technology news. This is about Microsoft. They've just named a new chief executive to replace Steve Ballmer. He's called Satya Nadella. He's currently head of cloud and enterprise. That builds and runs the firm's computing platforms and developer tools. Microsoft's also said that Bill Gates will be stepping down as chairman of the company. More details later. Coming up in about 20 minutes' time on the programme, Matthew McConaughey, the Hollywood star, on the risk of playing a homophobic, drug-abusing Texan rodeo rider who gets HIV.
The risk was that the materials scared me in the right way. The risk was in that I was like, wow, boy, there's a lot, there's so much to do here, and there's such a potential to do this well, McConaughey. We really got to go to work. That was the risk.
More from Matthew McConaughey in about 20 minutes' time. You're listening to NewsHour from the BBC.
The BBC NewsHour is distributed in the U.S. by American Public Media with support from the investment firm of Raymond James, Wealth Management, Banking, and Capital Markets. Learn more at lifewellplanned.com. And from Lumosity.com, a brain training program designed by neuroscientists that's been used by 50 million people worldwide. More at Lumosity.com.
It's 9:30, and all this week on VPR Classical, join Joe Getz for the special series Beyond Beethoven. Here pianist David Kaplan and cellist Benjamin Capps perform the sonatas of Mendelssohn and Brahms. Listen afternoons this week at 3 o'clock for Beyond Beethoven. Visit vpr.net/classical to download these exclusive recordings. Support for VPR is provided by Creative Workforce Solutions, supporting Vermont's business community with comprehensive staffing resources. Information at cwsvt.com. And Patagonia Burlington on Bank Street, locally owned and dedicated to Patagonia footwear, travel gear, and clothing for children and adults.
BBC News with Jonathan Izard. The trial has begun in Paris of a former Rwandan intelligence officer accused of complicity in the genocide in his country 20 years ago. Pascal Simbikangwa denies the charges against him. The Rwandan Justice Minister welcomed the trial, the first of its kind in France, but lamented it had taken so long to come to court. Representatives of a Pakistani Taliban negotiating team have reacted furiously after a government delegation failed to turn up for preliminary talks. One of the Pakistani Taliban delegates warned that anything could happen now. Earlier, government negotiators said they needed more information about the Taliban team before talks could start. A senior manager at Japan's national broadcaster NHK has denied that Japanese troops massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians in the Chinese city of Nanjing in 1937. Naoki Hyakuta called accounts of the rape of Nanjing Chinese propaganda. An armed gang in Brazil has raided a hospital in Rio de Janeiro, an incident that correspondents say will heighten security concerns in the run-up to the Football World Cup. Witnesses say several men with handguns went from ward to ward on Monday night, robbing patients and medical staff. Ukraine's opposition is expected to present demands in Parliament shortly for the release of jailed protesters and a reduction in the powers of President Viktor Yanukovych. It wants the reinstatement of Ukraine's previous constitution, bringing the presidential election forward to this year. Thailand's main opposition Democrat Party has urged the Constitutional Court to annul the disrupted general election. A lawyer said the petition also called for the party of the Prime Minister, Yingluck Shinawatra, to be disbanded. The Democrat Party, which wants the political system changed, boycotted the election. And police in South Africa have used stun grenades and rubber bullets to disperse about 3,000 striking miners near the town of Rustenburg. It's the biggest industrial unrest in South Africa's platinum sector since police shot dead 34 strikers at the Marikana mine in 2012. That's the latest BBC News.
Coming up next on NewsHour, the man who wants to revolutionise education in India and the world. First, though, our daily look at the world of business. And stock markets across Europe have fallen after steep drops in Asia and the US. The Nikkei is down, and on Monday, the Dow Jones in New York fell more than 2%, its worst day in more than 7 months. So what's going on? Here's Duncan Bartlett of our business desk.
Well, what people are really focusing on at the moment is this very sharp fall in terms of shares in Japan, down 4% in a sudden drop on one day, and that came after several other large falls on the Tokyo stock market in recent days. And the Japanese are quite puzzled as to what's going on. In fact, the Japanese economics minister, Akira Mari, has said that Japan's economy is in a perfectly good state, and what he says is that the financial markets are overreacting to US economic data. So, look at Japan first of all. It was on Tuesday that Toyota, which is obviously one of Japan's biggest companies, said that its annual profits are going to double. It's going to reach a record level of profits this year. Its sales are up all over the world, including China, including America. And the big Japanese banks are also doing very well, lending more money, making higher profits. So you'd think, wouldn't you, that that would all boost the Japanese stock market? And yet it didn't. Or, well, it didn't in the short term. Over the long term, the Japanese stock market rose about 50% last year. So today's fall of about 4% needs to be put into perspective.
Is it just about Japan, or are there worries about other big economies?
Well, the focus, I think, at the moment is what's going to happen to the American economy. It's been stimulated by a huge amount of money which has been pumped into it by the central bank, the Federal Reserve, as part of the so-called quantitative easing program. Now it's beginning to scale that back. And the question that investors have got is, when that curtain is lifted, what will they see behind it? Will they see that the economy has recovered and that it's actually stable now, or will they see cracks? And that's what they're concerned about.
It seems that they don't like what they're starting to see through the curtain.
It's only a small thing so far, which is that the growth in manufacturing slowed down a bit last month. There was some odd weather, as I know you reported on News Weather, on News Hour in the United States in January anyway, so that led to some factory closures.